Okay, Emily bought a 2024 Yamaha Bolt. It's an awesome bike. I've ridden it a handful of times. But the only thing is her leg hits this air cleaner. The air cleaner is pretty big. So I'm going to make like a bread box style chopper air cleaner for this throttle body, just to skinny it up. It'll be narrower, skinnier, not so tall. So I'll start by taking this air box off and seeing what we have to work with. This thing's awesome because you don't even have to give it throttle. It's fuel injected, so you don't even have to give it throttle. It just let the clutch out slow and it'll pull itself. It handles good, it's got nice brakes. Everything a brand new bike should have. The Yamaha was having a sale. She got a good deal. I will say the seat is rather uncomfortable. I put this sheepskin on here and it helps a lot. But if anybody has experience with like the Saddleman Profiler, how do those feel? Or if there's any seat recommendations you can give, would love to hear it. This is just 3 screws that hold it to the throttle body. And then there's this support bracket. There's something to be said about just having a motorcycle you can get on and start, and it's reliable and it rides nice. I think that's why I like my KLR 650 so much. Okay, I'm gonna have to do something about that breather. I forgot completely about it, but I'll just order an aftermarket breather or something for it. That's our plate that we're gonna mount to. The way that airbox works is it seals here and then it comes out over this throttle position sensor and the throttle itself. I'm not gonna make mine that way. I'm gonna make mine sit flat. It'll have to be narrow enough to sit in right here and right here. I might be able to clearance the throttle a little bit, but there should be enough room to get a screw through here. So what I'm gonna do is I'll measure from here, 5 1/4 will be lots by, this is 3 1/2. Plus we need to account for the actual width of the filter material. I'm just putting a foam filter in this. The choppers just run screens. They don't even have filters on them. Lots of dudes just run nothing. Like on their Super E's, they'll just they'll cut down their Super E teardrop and run no filter. For the street, a foam filter is going to be plenty. Rather than mess around with measuring out the holes on this thing, I'm just going to hold this up to where it's clearing here and clearing there, mainly on this side, just because that moves. And I'll mark this right here and right here. We want it to be fairly tight. At the end of the day, it's filtering air on this side of the intake, so if there's leaks in here, it doesn't really matter. Okay, I measured the intake and plotted it out on this piece of stainless. If I get a 2-inch hole saw, I can do a hole here, there, and here, and then I can just either die grind or sand the radius into these. There has to be a little bit of a right there, so I think that the hole saw is going to be the best bet for this. It's stainless, so it's going to be miserable, but yeah, we'll try that. There is a fly in here. Keeps buzzing around, and when I look for him, I can't find him, and when I'm doing something, he flies around my head. This is as slow as this mill will go. Alright, I'm not going to put you through this, so I'll bring you back when the holes are drilled. Woohoo! I made Mickey Mouse! Woohoo! That was probably the worst fucking Mickey Mouse impression ever. Alright, I cut that guy off. Now let's look. Oh yeah, we don't hate that. That is a really tight fit. That's really nice. I'm gonna have to clearance a little bit down here, and I think we'll radius these off. Die grind it, smooth these transitions out, and that should be a fit. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, man. I sacrificed 2 of the original mounting bolts. I cut them down and then put them in the lathe and just put the slightest little point on them. I originally was going to try to transfer punch these from the original box, but my plate's too big so far to fit in there. I blued up or redded up the back, sharpied up the back of the plate, and then I can hold this on here and I'll just do a little Yeah, and see, I have 2 tiny little marks where I can drill these clearance holes for the mounting hardware. There'll be 2 up here, and then that outer plate will sandwich into that one. I threw a bigger center punch in there, and this is a tight clearance to that mounting bolt. All right, I got that on there. Clearance is perfect. Instead of doing an extra breather, what am I trying to say? Instead of an extra breather, am I stupid? A breather filter that goes on the end of this, I'm just gonna through drill this, and then I'll make a little bung to weld onto the back, and this can sit on there. These 3 sides are square to each other, but this one is slightly out, so I'm gonna make it parallel with the top, just to give me a good starting point with the flat bar. Just gonna hold it flush with the edge, and then I'll tack a couple spots, clamp it, bend this flat bar around until I can kind of get it into a shape that I like. I have a socket clamped to this, an 1/8 of an inch in, and it's touching this piece that I just tacked, and I'm hoping that I can just bend this around and follow this radius. I don't want to flame bend these because I'm always worried that I'm gonna cook the chromium out of the stainless. So we'll see how good this bends around this socket. We might have to do some manipulating with some clamps just to pull it in, but so far, not bad. That ended up being a little bit bigger of a radius than I wanted, but it is really hard to bend this stuff by hand. Ouch. Setting the socket in an 1/8 of an inch so that it will come close to where it needs to be. And then I'll just tighten the ever-living F out of this. It's like 30 degrees today, so it's really, really warm. Maybe if I clamp something straight to this, that might help. That works good. Just use the clamp and use it as a form tool around the socket. There we go. That looks nice. Oh my god, I tightened that up. Oh my god. Oh, holy, who tightened that, hey? Oh, I'm tightening it. That's why, guys. Idiot. I'm going the wrong way. Now it's really tight. Okay, I'll pull that in, tack it, and we can straighten it out. Okay, I figured out the move. All you gotta do is, when you kind of get it bent, you use the bench vise and it'll push that in, and then it's nice and flush. I pulled it past, so I'll put it back in here, and it'll squeeze it in flush. Hopefully this thing doesn't suck. My original plan was I was going to make like a plywood buck to wrap this around after I drilled all the holes, and then I was going to machine slots in it to match the kind of slot thing that the bike has going on, but I realized that that would be a massive pain in the wiener, so I didn't do it. Way easier in the vise. Doing this all completely by eye. I'm surprised how much material this took to get around there. This was 2 feet. This is the last bend. I will pull it around this guy, and then I'll mark it with pencil. I'll cut it, and then we'll be able to manipulate it in. I had to sneak up on it. Okay, the frame of the box is complete. I'm gonna get a machinist square, and I'm just gonna squeeze this in with the vise until all these are square. This thing is relatively square. I welded up the seam on the inside and a little bit on the outside. I'll end up grinding that flush. But I'm just gonna go and do some stitches on the inside of this without filler rod. It's gonna be sandwiched between bolts, so it doesn't need to be particularly strong. Figured out all the layout on this. I did the math on the bore openings of the throttle body, and the surface area of that is equal to 15, it's like 14 point something half-inch holes. So I have 15 marks on here, which will give me slightly over the area that's on that. I don't have a drill press. I don't want to drill these by hand, so I'm just gonna hold this on the side of the table and see if I can pilot drill all these. Actually, I'm gonna clamp this because it's not seating very nice. Alright, the camera battery died. I pilot drilled all these on the mill. I clamped it to the bed, and then I remembered I had a brand new step drill, and so I just drilled all these by hand in the bench vise, which went really good. So I drilled those out, deburred it, ran out of stainless, so I cut a strip of 16 gauge, I think this is. It just fits over these holes. I'll have to tack it and move it into place in there a little bit. I'm gonna mark this into thirds, so 2 lines, and then I'll stagger smaller holes because I don't want to put half-inch holes in this. Figure out the circumference of this. I'll figure out what size diameter I want, and then I'll have to figure out how many holes it needs to match the area of these holes, if that makes sense. I'm trying to match the area of each of these holes in this so that it gets maximum airflow through it. I don't know how air filters work, but we'll try to maximize airflow as much as we can. This is how I figure out a circumference of the easiest way. Like, instead of wrapping this with a tape measure or whatever, I'm just gonna line this weld up right here, and then I'm gonna roll this all the way around to right there. I'll mark the table, and then I can measure 12¼ inches all the way around this. I have this split into thirds, and I'm just gonna center drill crisscross pattern all the way around. Just gonna use a center drill because I don't wanna have to center punch all these. Alright, that guy's done. Holes are drilled, it's deburred. I had to cut it down. I just put it up here and traced it with a soapstone. Because these holes are in where the filter material goes, I don't want to screw into the material and then have little bits of foam go into the motor. I have some 1/4 inch hot rolled steel. I'm going to just make 2 little spacers essentially with a 5mm hole in it. I'll tack it in there, and then I can just jam that foam in and around it, kind of deal. And then when I put the lid on, the bolt will just slide right through. I'll face these both down to the right length, then I'll through drill them. Alright, these guys are made up. Hit them with a file and a Scotch-Brite. I went and I got some cap head screws. I couldn't find stainless ones long enough, but I think that black with the brushed, it'll go with the bike because there's a bunch of brushed stuff on here, plus the black engine. So I will tack these guys on. This thing just fits. Those are bolted to the plate. I'll use some 309 and just do 2 little tacks. I just want enough to hold this in place. What was that? Oh, it arced out through the screw. All right, I got the lid part. I'm just gonna transfer punch these two holes. I'll drill this plate out, and then I can fit this plate to the rest of it. I'll just bolt them together and sand it down. I've got those guys drilled. And so same thing, I'll use that little transfer point that I made, put it in here. My holes are out slightly. I'm gonna have to open these holes up a little bit. But again, I'll just do a little tap. And there it is, that tiny little mark. You don't want to hit too hard because this is the intake after all. Just enough to mark that Sharpie. I drilled those all out to one size over the 5mm drill. I've got them bolted together. I'll mark them out, and then I'll rough cut everything, and then I'll go over it with sanders and whatever. Oh, scratching my new hardware. I mean, technically we could be done, but I think I should probably utilize this bracket and support this. Because right now, all that weight of this is sitting on this intake, and I'm assuming that that's what that was for originally, was like a carb support, intake support. So as much as I don't want to put one on here, I would rather just take this off for the sake of longevity of the intake. I should probably make one fit on there. We could probably fancy up the cover plate a little bit too. I need to make a thing on the back for the breather. It'll just be a piece of 1/2-inch rod with a hole drilled in it. I'll weld it to the back, and then I think the same thing, I'll just use some 1/2-inch, kind of come out and down. I got a black socket head cap screw, countersink that bung, and then weld it to here. And then that way this is just supported to the engine block. It is so hot. Now I'll drill a 6mm hole through this, and then I'll countersink whatever size to get that head to sit flush. I'm just going to use a drill to put the countersink in there. I know that this won't sit flat. There won't be a flat shoulder for this to register on, but I don't care. So, yeah. Almost. Perfect. Kind of trying to get a reference of where I want this thing to line up. I don't want it to just go straight in. It'll be a small bend, but at least it'll go into their square. I've got my bending fixture put in here. I'm just gonna put the slightest little bend in this. Can't fucking see. Right there. I measured it out with the angle finder, but holding it up there works better. I want it to match that bracket that's on there. Push this guy down. Right there. That looks... I can live with that. I'll tack it to this guy first, and then I'll take some weight off this and tack it to that. Oops. Uh-oh. I melted the plastic. Oh no, don't tell Emily. Idiot. I welded that one out just because stainless likes to move around, so at least I know that that one is going to sit where it wants to be. I'm going to just take a little bit of pressure on this. There's movement in here, but I'm just going to lift it ever so slightly and I'll tack it. Oh yeah. The tiniest little stitch here. With my head right in the way. It is so hot, guys. I'm sorry if the video is kind of trash. I haven't been really feeling like being the biggest cinematographer. I'm just trying to get this done, and it's taken me all day. Of course. I put this in the vise in the grinding room, and I went at it with files and the random orbit sander to get this cap to sit on there more flat. It had a pretty good rock in it. It's still not great, but I got some paper gasket that'll fill those gaps. And then I turned this up on the lathe. It's just a piece of 1/2" stainless. Put a 3/8 hole in it like the original air cleaner had, and then I put a 3/8 hole in the back of the cleaner. I'll weld that guy on there, and that's just for the breather hose. I put the nicest weld on the back side of this thing. So Kurt Bennett from 4th Floor Chop Shop taught me about this little trick. It's called bouge cuts or edge cuts, and basically you just take a straight cut on a die grinder and then you put it in and it gives it some texture around the edge. I did it on the cylinder or on the rocker boxes of my shovel head. I did that with a hand file, which I liked because you get a lot of control and you can move those cuts around and make it look really nice, but this is stainless steel. There's no way that I'm hand filing these edge cuts in here. So I'm just going to use a die grinder with a straight cut on it, and I'm going to go around and put a little edge cut on that. I'm going to go at this with 40 grit sandpaper. I'm going to use some WD-40 on it. Supposedly, if you use oil with your paper, it doubles the grit, so 80, but it doesn't clog up as bad. So I'm just going to hit this with 40 grit. It'll be a rough brush, and then I'm going to take this out to my parents and sandblast it for an even finish. I threw them through the ultrasonic cleaner with some simple green just to get whatever grease and grime off of them. And I will paint all this mild steel. I'll mask it off and paint the inside. My sandblaster's at my parents', and so before I head out there, I bought some paper gasket. I'll just trace this out. We'll cut that out. But I'd rather do this before I finish it. Okay, I have this thing masked off. I added some to the edges just because I really don't want overspray on this. It might look like shit, but I did the inside really well, so these are just stuck there for overspray. I'm going to spray the inside black, just because this is mild steel. That's the only reason. You can't handle this without wearing gloves. Stainless is so easy to get fingerprints on, so it's gloves on. You got to be so careful when you're handling this because of the brushed finish. And before you say something, I'm not clear coating it, because I don't want to. How's that for a paint shaker? These are the only ones I could get, were by 50, and they're slightly too long, and the 40s are too short, so I need 45s. So I'll sand it down, and then I can spin the nut off, and it'll clean that thread up. I know grinding grit is bad for latheways, but trust me when I say that this thing is a piece of shit. I got this filter foam from Amazon. It looks to be the exact same stuff that Uni sells for half the price. I don't know if the sheet's as big, but I don't need a whole lot. Just gonna cut this into 1-inch strips. Just gonna jam this shit in there. I will oil this. What I use is just canola oil. All you do is get this stuff nice and drenched. Get it soaked right through with canola oil, and then you just gotta let it sit. I'm not doing it now because I don't want to deal with a bunch of oil for the video. All right. It's not only good, it's good enough. It's done. It even though I was wearing gloves, it still somehow had fingerprints all over the front face. So I put some Scotch-Brite on the bottom of my orbital sander, and that is the look. I should probably do the whole thing in that Scotch-Brite because it looks great. But yeah, she likes it. I showed it to her tonight. She was pretty grateful to have something handmade on her bike, custom with a K. So yeah. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, Cole Yellowbird. That's it. Built an air cleaner. I'm sweating like a motherfucker. Can you tell it's hot?